Welcome to the Real Santa Fe podcast. We're so excited that you're here for an episode with one of my favorite Santa Fe people. And I'm telling you, if this isn't real Santa Fe, I don't know what is. Anne Hillerman, who's one of my favorite authors, has agreed to be on the podcast with us again. I couldn't believe it when you agreed the first time, Anne. So it's always a treat. And it seems like every time we do this, we are introducing a new book that she's just published. I counted on in the book that this is number 14. Anne is a writer of many things, but her latest book is Shadow of the Solstice. It's yet another installment in what what our great friend Bernie and her sweetheart Chee, at least in book form. They're not there yet on Dark Winds. I keep waiting, but Anne is the author. She's also one of the executive producers of Dark Winds, which is one of the most popular series on streaming on TV right now. And I could talk for a long time, but the most interesting person in the room is Anne. So, hello, I'm so happy you're here.
Hi, me too. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about my new baby. I'm just so happy to have this book finally out so people can read it.
I know that maybe it was a couple of months ago, back around Christmas. I said, "Can we get together?" And you're like, "I'm finishing this book." It's a process, isn't it?
Indeed. And this book was a little more complicated than a lot of my books have been. Usually, when I'm writing a book, I start with the scenery. But with this book, there were a couple things in the news that really got my attention. So I started with those giant ideas and then had to kind of condense them into enough that would be a plot and a subplot for a book. And then when I got it sort of put together, I realized that even though those two stories were really good, it was hard to mesh them together. But luckily, I had a really good editor who helped me with it. And yeah, now that it's here, I'm really happy with it. So thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Oh, I got to tell you, so my husband, who reads mysteries as well, said, "Well, tell me about." He said, "I can tell you're really enthralled with this one." And I said, the thing about reading a Hillerman book, first your dad's that I read for years, especially when I was living away from New Mexico. Um, it's always, and then yours, it's always like stepping back into the room with some of your favorite people. And you're so good at conveying your characters, and they're they're so vivid and they're so real. And so I said, it's so exciting. I'm like, I'm hanging out again with Bernie and Chee, and Darlene is sober now. It's so it's like all these things that I don't want to give everything away, but there were parts of it and I didn't, of course, read at the end where those plot lines came from, but I kept saying, especially the plot line where Mrs. Raymond ends up in Phoenix. I was like, can this be real? And because it was so awful. And that's why I couldn't stop reading, because I could not stand for those characters to be in any sort of danger, but I know they're always going to be in danger because that's that's where we end up. But thank you for this one. I really liked it.
Well, Bunny, one good thing about writing a series is that readers may have that same sense of apprehension that you had. Are these characters going to be all right? But you kind of know, if this is like this one, book 10 in the series, that chances are they're going to be okay and they're going to make it through for book 12. So I have to say, I really love these characters. And the more Jim Chee and Joe Leaphorn were characters that my dad had developed pretty firmly before he passed on, and then I began to write the series. But Bernadette Manuelito was a character he had kind of used as a adjunct, as a walk-on. I mean, and so when I began writing the series, I elevated her to be a full-fledged crime solver. So that gave me the challenge. I was going to say problem, but mostly challenge of having to think of ways to engage all three of them. And in this book, Joe Leaphorn is kind of he comes in a little bit, but he basically gets a rest because he worked real hard in the book before this. So when the book opens, Jim Chee is looking into the discovery of a body that has been found at a uranium waste dump site. And Bernie gets a call to go out on the Navajo Nation to this Navajo couple has a site where they host revival meetings, but this time they've opened it up to not Navajo people, but a bunch of outsiders. And they tell them, oh, we're going to do a meditation. You know, we're all about love and peace and healing Mother Earth. But then things start to go wrong. And so Bernie goes out to investigate that. And in this book, I was able to use who had a woman who had been a minor character, Darlene Manuelito, Bernie's sister, as more of a main character. So when this book opens, Darlene has decided that I think she decided in the last book that she's going to become a nurse. So she's going to school to get her nursing certificate. And as part of that, she has a job as a home health aide. So Darlene goes to check on the lady who she's helping, and the lady isn't there. So that's like the third part of this mystery. So it was great fun weaving in all these elements. But like I said, when I got to the end, I realized I had some loose threads. But thank goodness that I had some good editors and they pulled everything together. And it really made the book stronger than it was when I first imagined it.
Well, this one was, I mean, they're all suspenseful, but this one with the added piece of the storyline that involves Darlene and the woman she was caring for who disappeared and her son and perhaps some the word I thought of was shenanigans. It's not shenanigans, it's potential fraud, but the things that people are doing to exploit Native people, that piece of, I mean, I liked all of it, but that piece of it, I just kept thinking, what is going on? That was so compelling.
Well, I have to say, I mean, that was based on real life, unfortunately.
No.
There was a huge scandal in Arizona. Just like in my story, a lot of unsuspecting people who were having trouble with drugs and alcohol were basically kidnapped and taken to Phoenix and signed up as Arizona residents so these fraudsters could steal their Medicaid benefits. And then they were housed, get fed, but never given any treatment. And some of them, when they realized what was up, said, wait a minute, we need to go home now. And the people said, sorry, that wasn't part of the deal, and just left them out on the street. So then they were homeless in a big city. It was really, really awful. It was like $2 billion of fraud. And 40 people or more died as part of this. And that's just what we know about. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them were homeless, didn't have any identification, and their bodies are still probably unclaimed somewhere. Anyway, what really caught my attention about this story was that the Navajo Nation, when their residents would come and say, what happened to my cousin? What happened to my nephew? I've been looking all over for them. Then the Navajo police went to Phoenix and helped bring some of these people home. And so I thought, well, this is really a lovely ending, or at least a lovely start of an ending to a very awful story. And as you know, and one of the good things about writing mysteries is that you, as a mystery writer, have basically the duty as part of the way the genre is set up of ending things with the crime solved and the bad guys punished. And so I was happy, even though it doesn't always work out like that in real life. I was really delighted to be able to do that in my book.
Well, and you did that, you did it so well. And um and I was so relieved when I got to the part where you talked about how those people were prosecuted for this real life event. I was telling Toby about it, and he said, well, that can't be the truth. And I'm like, no, it is. But you did that in Lost Birds as well. I mean, that is another horrific event in Navajo history. I mean, other tribes, I'm sure as well, and Pueblos, where children were basically taken away from their families, and the families were lied to, and then they were sold elsewhere into other families all over the country. And you did that, you covered that one very well. So kudos to you. I love, I know that when I'm reading one of your books, you're hitting on something that's important, and and you do it really well. So
Oh, well, thank you. You know, one thing that as a reader, when I'm reading fiction, I love having a story that moves along and having characters that engage me. But I also like books that teach me something. And so that's one of my, I guess you'd say, subversive goals when I'm writing my books. And I also like to explore my own curiosity and learn something in the process of researching the story. So I that's what sustains me as a writer, and I hope that's what is keeping my readers engaged too.
well, and I just, is that part of, I mean, it feels like that's what your dad did as well when he started his, how many books did he write before he passed away? How many
He
are in that?
wrote he wrote 17 in the Joe Leaphorn Jim Chee series. He wrote two standalone novels. He wrote a whole bunch of nonfiction. He was a real go-getter. And it's amazing to think he wrote all those books. For most of his life, he had a full-time job, either as a journalist or as a college teacher, and he raised us six kids. So, if I ever start feeling sorry for myself, I think, well, hey, who's my role model here?
Yeah,
Of course, I had my mother, and my mother was brilliant. She took care of every detail of life, so dad didn't have to worry about it. So I
that's,
don't feel too guilty if I have to take a day off.
and I want to speak because we can't assume that everybody who's listening knows all about you or your dad, or but you, um he was recognized, and you have been too, for being very true to the Navajo culture. I mean, you're not an outsider who came in and just made up. You both have immersed yourself in the culture, and the coolest thing is that I learned a lot of new Navajo words, um, and there is a glossary in the back. But um, tell me about that. Tell me about the relationship you have with that group of people, with that tribe.
That was really one of the real gifts that my dad gave me. He had built such goodwill with the Navajo people over the years, his years of writing the stories, that when I decided maybe I could continue this series and I would have a question to ask, whoever I asked was always very gracious and forthcoming with me. And sometimes the answer was, you really shouldn't talk about that. And that was fine. I mean, then I pulled back. And I think that maybe is, I don't think my dad got that answer so much. Times have changed since 1970 when dad began that series. But one thing that makes me really happy, if ever I'm doing a talk, oh, say in Farmington at the Farmington Public Library. Last time I did a talk there, maybe a third of the audience were Navajo people. And they had a lot of really good questions. And then afterwards, say a Navajo grandmother and the daughter and the granddaughter all came up and they had me sign their books. And then they said, "Oh, we'd like to get a picture taken with you." I felt like I was an honored celebrity. And then the grandmother said, "I love your dad's books, but I think it's about time somebody realized how strong we Navajo women are." So I thought,
I
"Yay,
love
thank
that.
you for saying that." Yeah, yeah, I loved it too.
That's great. And can you give people that don't know some perspective on the size of the Navajo Nation, and I mean what it really is is like for the Navajo police force to try to cover that?
It's it's a very complicated and dangerous job. The Navajo Nation is about the size of New England, and I think there are. I'm saying this from memory, and I haven't looked it up lately, but there are something like 100 officers who are covering this whole area. It's divided into five different sub-districts. And I mean, those officers, some are patrol officers like my Bernie Manuelito, but some are detectives, some are guys who specialize, say, in crimes against children. I mean, they have all of the departments, or a lot of the departments that, say, an urban police force would have, but just not the funding and not the staff. And I think it's remarkable that they do as fabulous a job as they do. I'm really, my hats are off to them, or my hat is off to them. Or if I had two hats, they'd both be off to them.
It's, you know, I lived in Farmington, and so I know that country, but it'll be like Bernie gets in the car and she's going somewhere to do something, and it's a long drive. And I'm thinking, yes, it is. It's like it could be an hour or two to get to the places that she's describing on dirt roads, perhaps without cell service.
That's
And
right.
of course,
And then she gets there and she's dealing with say a dangerous person, so maybe somebody who has some mental health problems or has had too much to drink, and she's basically by herself. So she has to use her common sense. She can't just like, pull out her gun and threaten to shoot this guy. She's got to have that kind of compassion and sense of, I mean, there was a lot of talk about community policing. And I think the Navajo Nation is kind of the macrocosm of community policing. A lot of times when they would go out to a call, chances are the person who needs help is somebody who's related to them or related to somebody they know. So it's a little different than just dealing with a stranger who's out of control. So that's, I mean, and in a way, it makes it easier for me as a writer because I don't have to deal with all of this fabulous technology now that police departments have. It's kind of like going back in time a few years to deal with something that's a little more basic and a little more of I guess you could say, the human element of solving crimes. Instead of calling up a national database, you just think, what do I know about this guy? And what can I figure out from his body language or from the way he's talking or from the way his house looks? So anyway,
I
I am
never,
so much enjoying writing this series. Do you think we can talk about Dark Winds for a minute or two?
yes, that's what I wanted to segue into that by saying, of course, in Dark Winds, they had no cell phones. And is it the funnest? I mean, it's so much fun. It's so smart. I don't recall, and tell me if I'm wrong. Were you an executive producer in the first series, in the first season? You have been for forever.
Have been the only I have to say, while I would love to take credit for how wonderful the show is, the only thing I actually produced was my signature on the contract, which gave them the right to use my dad's stories and to use the first four of my books in the series. But yeah, I'm really thrilled with it. I think they were so smart. The casting, I think, is just really, really right on. And then the fact that they have incorporated so many Native people in the writers' room as directors, just everywhere on the set. I've been lucky enough to be able to watch some of the filming, and it's just so uplifting to see such wonderful people working on such a wonderful show. They had some interns from the Institute of American Indian Arts who were working with them. They've really done a fine job of reaching out to the Native community. So I give them two big thumbs up.
So I keep hearing, I mean, I think everybody's brilliant. I keep hearing that. And, and I'm not done yet with season three. I'm this close, but I keep hearing and seeing that everybody's like, oh, Zon McLaren, he's up, he's got to get an Emmy this year. It's so amazing. It's such, I mean, the acting is so good. And the directing, I'm good friends with Chris. Chris Eyre is a neighbor of mine, and I'm like, these guys, they've got it. I mean, it's so good. And I loved the little piece where Robert Redford and George R. had cameos in the jail. I mean, if you guys haven't seen Dark Winds, you've got to turn it on right now and watch it from the
Well,
beginning.
wait
But
till
that
our
was,
interview's
say what?
wait till our interview's over, then turn it on.
Oh, absolutely. Not yet. Yes, not yet. But I'm so what I know that Johanna was so good to create this outline, but I was really interested to know, is there anything that has appeared in Dark Winds that you've been like, oh, I know that's exactly the way it should have been. That's exactly the way my dad or I, it just thinks, I'm wondering if there's some part of it where you just had this aha moment, was like, boy, did they nail that.
Oh yeah, in the very first season where they introduced Jim Chee, and I wasn't so thrilled with the Jim Chee in the first season, but they when he comes in, Bernadette Manuelito gets to be his boss, and I think, okay, this is my Bernie, this is great. I love the way they incorporated the landscape into the filming. A lot of what happens in my books and in Dad's books is time where one of the characters is driving in a car and they're thinking. And when you're writing a book, you can get away with that, but you cannot get away with that in a TV show. You know, something has to be happening. So I think they've done just a marvelous job of kind of using the books of dads that they've used so far as inspiration and then moving the stories forward from there. So I'm really thrilled with it.
I'm so excited to see what happens. And they're filming season 4. Have you been out to watch any of that?
I haven't had a chance to, not yet. I
It is
did get to watch the very, very last scene of season 3 though. And the wind was blowing. There's horses in it. The horses weren't cooperating, like all kinds of things. And then it started to rain, and they had to anyway. It was maybe 3 hours or maybe 4. It was forever. And finally, we see the scene. They film it, and then Chris Ayres calls me over and he says, you know, look at this. And I got to see it right through the way it was going to look in the final, and it was perfect. And I thought, gee, they say so much just with an expression. And then I thought, golly, I'm glad I'm not in the TV business because I could write this scene in like two. I mean, it might not be as emotional, but it would be the same scene in like 2 paragraphs, you know. So it gave me great respect for the talent and the creativity that those actors and directors and everybody involved with it has.
it's so exciting. And I want folks to know that if you're I mean, it's filmed primarily here. I don't. I mean, and but if you're driving north on the road between Santa Fe and Powake, and you look over at the oh my gosh, like Camel Rock, the old Camel Rock Casino, you'll see all of those old vehicles from the 70s that they're using. It's Johanna and I are going to have to go up and just do a little YouTube, a little reel of all those vehicles sitting there because it's so cool to see all those vehicles from, when I was a little girl sitting out there on the set. It's so fun in that back lot. So
Yeah,
it's here. They're doing it. It's so cool.
yeah.
So what's next? First of all, where can people find the new book?
I did the book launch at Collected Works, and they have a lot of signed copies. On Saturday, I'm going to Barnes and Noble. I'm going to do a little talk about my book, and I'll have some signed books there. And then I'm doing Albuquerque, Durango, Prescott, and then I'm coming back to Santa Fe, back to public attention in Santa Fe on May 17th. I'm doing an event with Nasario Garcia and a Navajo poet named Vinaya Yazi for the School of Advanced Research. And if anybody wants to know about that, they can just look on the SAR website. And all my events are on my website too. It's just annehillerman.com. So
Perfect. Perfect. And what do you want what do you want folks to get from this book?
that's a really good question. I think one of the themes in this book is that things aren't always as they seem, and people who seem pretty dark maybe can change. And people on the other hand, some people can seem like they're all light and roses and they really aren't. And I guess maybe the bottom line is that in the end, if we all take care of each other, things are going to work out okay. I mean, that's what happens in the cult gone wrong story, and that certainly is what happens in the sober living Darlene to the rescue story. I guess do not despair. Keep
No,
keep your
and take
optimism tuned up. I think that's the message.
do not despair. I love that. Well, and once again, we could talk for another hour and a half about all of these. I want folks to know that Anne is so amazing at her craft, but also so generous and so kind. I've gone now to a number of your readings, and I'm always struck by how you are just as curious about the people you're meeting as they are about you. And that's really a huge gift to give that to your readers. So thank you for doing that. And your stories, I mean, they make us think, they make us feel, but most of all, it makes me really proud to be somebody who has lived in the Southwest always. You portray it so beautifully, it and its people so beautifully. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, having lived in Santa Fe for more than 40 years, I think has really nurtured my spirit. There's just something about this place that makes it okay to take chances with your creative energy. And I very, very much appreciate that.
I can't say anything else after that. Take care.
I love that. That was perfect, Anne. Thank you.